Welcome to Whole Team Eats Podcast, a 24/8 media production. Ever wonder who trains your favorite athlete? Join Tim Miller as he takes a look at the behind-the-scenes training of professional and collegiate athletes. Tim connects with trainers, athletes, and others in the sports community to share their stories. This podcast is dedicated to highlighting the work of athletes and trainers to inspire action and build community.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to an all-new episode of Whole Team Eats Podcast presented by our friends at Turfblox. This is episode 4, season 1. I'm your host, Tim Miller, and on this show, I sit down with Gary Scheffler of GLS Training. Gary grew up in New Orleans in a family that was closely connected to the community, with his dad being a recreation director. After suffering a shoulder injury in a men's softball league, Gary was prescribed medication that eventually led to his battle with addiction for a number of years. After overcoming adversity, Gary was able to start training kids at a local Boys and Girls Club, which led to him finding his passion for training. Gary now trains several collegiate and professional athletes, including Jamar Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals, Marquise Brown of the Arizona Cardinals, and Andre Cisco of the Jacksonville Jaguars. On the show, we discuss Gary's background and what it was like to go from battling addiction to training some of the best athletes in their respective sports. We also talk about how the Griddy dance was created and how it gained popularity among athletes. Gary's story is not only for those in the training community, but also for those struggling to overcome adversity and find their passion. This show is made possible by our presenting sponsor, Turfblox. Trusted by elite trainers and professional athletes around the country, Turfblox are becoming one of the most versatile training tools available by bridging the gap between the gym and playing field. From general athletic performance to sports-specific positional training, Turfblox are the way to take your game to the next level. Visit www.turfblox.com to see how they're changing the game from the ground up. Great to have you on the show, Gary. I'm really excited to hear and learn more about your backstory and tell our audience about how you came into training.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to get started with you.
So I think kind of a natural place to start at is, can you tell us a little bit about how training has gone to start 2022? I know the last couple of years have been crazy with COVID and everything else that's gone on. So how has this year been as far as training goes?
It's been pretty good. With the GOATA stuff, we do certification. So we was able to have a performance cert. This weekend past, we had our second educational certification. And then we have another performance cert coming up this weekend coming. So that's been good because we was backed up a little bit because of COVID. We kind of caught up, and then just being able to, you kind of take those things for granted that everything's going to flow normal. And then when you have something like COVID hit you, it's like, whoa, people can't fly, people can't come in the country, because we get a lot of out-of-country people too. But it's the training, the education side of it's been great. The performance side of it's been good. The training stuff has been, the gym is not as up as normal. They have a few other locations that have popped up over the past couple of years in the New Orleans area. So there's a little bit more competition, I guess you could say, in the area. As far as like the professional side of everything, I'm still getting the pro guys that call me up. I do a lot of stuff virtually now. So, I'm working with a few guys like Amari Rogers and Calvin Tolliver hit me up today. So they got some guys that's starting to reach out. But the pro side of it's been good. So, I've been traveling a little bit with that, but it's going well. I mean, it's, on pace. Everything's good as long as we keep the doors open, right?
Yeah, especially after 2020. As long as you keep the doors open is always a good thing.
Right.
And we'll circle back to more about GOATA and the training with your professional athletes a little bit later on in the show. But I think where I wanted to start here today was to learn a little bit more about you, not only as a trainer, but a little bit about your background growing up in New Orleans, and give our listeners a little bit of an idea of how you came from where you were starting your career to into a training career.
Right.
I think you have one of the most interesting stories that I've heard yet out of some of the trainers that I've spoke with. So why don't you get us started? You grew up in New Orleans. Why don't you tell us a little bit about growing up and playing sports and how you initially got into where you are today?
Yeah, so I grew up in Gretna, Louisiana, which is like we could throw a rock at the Superdome and hit it. And I had a regular, childhood. Went to Catholic school on the West Bank of on the West Bank side of the metropolitan New Orleans. High school was pretty competitive athletically. Archbishop Shaw High School. My dad was an administrator for recreation department. My sister played college basketball, so we had an athletic family. My mom coached track and stuff when she was younger. That's actually how she met my dad. But so we've been in the sports world the whole time. I started to kind of follow in my dad's footsteps a little bit. I got into the recreation side of everything. I started coaching 12-year-old bitty basketball when I was like 13, 14 years old. Right out the gate, I was helping him. 18, 19 years old, I had my own teams. I played a little baseball in high school, but nothing serious like that. I kind of stuck more to the coaching side of everything. And then won like a bitty world championship in 98. Had a good group of guys or whatever. A couple of them went play college football and stuff. We would get more of an athlete type than necessarily maybe a great basketball player. So we was fast, quick. Transition was a big thing we did, but that's a whole nother story or whatever. But no, I got into the travel softball thing, and I was traveling around the country out of high school or whatever, and I did it for a while, and then it got real serious. I was playing every night locally, and then every weekend we was out of town. And that's when the story kind of started to change. At the same time, kind of parallel to that, I started getting into the recreation side. I was running a rec department in Gretna. And right whenever that started, I had a shoulder injury playing this travel softball stuff. And went to the emergency room, give me a bottle of Vicodin, cortisone shot in the shoulder, and then all hell broke loose. I guess you could say, for lack of better words. So I was married. I had a kid at the time. Lost everything. It's about 10 years later, I'm eating 40 Lorcets a day and eating somas, and I can't function as an adult in society. To the point where I ended up basically homeless, living out of my car. Lost the car, sold that for drugs, and then it just turned into one of these things where I'm bouncing off of people's sofas, and I go spend a little night here and there at a hotel somewhere, one of these little cheap hotels, or I go find every now and then I go to a hospital, like a local hospital, and I kind of sit in a emergency room like I was waiting for somebody and just kind of catch a little shut eye or whatever. And it just got to the point where I couldn't live like that no more. I actually wrote a book about it, and the book is called Recoded, which kind of lines up with what we're doing with the athletes now with the recoding process. But the first chapter of the book is called Out of Time, and that was a big turning point for me. I had one of them little Boost Mobile flip phone thingies, and you pay as you go, so it wasn't really like where you could be a little late on your bill. And I'm on the phone with my mom, and she's kind of running this whole thing to me about, you're not going to be allowed to come here and see your daughter anymore. We got to completely cut you off. And man, like, I'm like, Mom, I'm gonna get a job, and I'm same old story, same old song and dance and stuff like that. And, the phone cut off on me, and then when the phone cut off, it was like I try to describe it to people, but they talk about hitting rock bottom and stuff like that, and you're basically homeless. You don't have people done figured out your bullshit. You can't manipulate people as well as you used to, and there's just like this pit in the bottom of your stomach where, man, it's like, what did I do? And I was born and raised Catholic, and not to have a big religious conversation or anything like that, but I never really had an understanding of God. And I think that was the first time I ever prayed. And, I just was like, man, this ain't supposed to be who I am. Like, I went from basically having growing up normal, and, it's like you got your life's unfolding in front of you, and you got your family and a daughter, and I'm responsible for people now. And then I started making these personal decisions, because that's what it is, to choose a selfish route and do what felt good for me. So I never was much of a husband or a father to my ex-wife, and to my oldest, which now everything's good. Naturally, when you get sober and you start being responsible for things, you get those things back most of the time. And in my case, thank God it worked out that way. But that was probably the first time that I ever really prayed, and I just was like, I need like some strength and some guidance, like to figure out what I need to do. And I kind of found my way to a buddy's house, and I was dope sick at the time too, so it was like just double, like it was. And I don't, if you don't know what that is, go look it up. But it's a miserable feeling. It's the reason why a lot of addicts continue to use and stuff. But I went and I ended up going into rehab at that point. And I went into rehab because it was probably the best option for me at the time, as far as somewhere to live and eat, and didn't have to be dope sick anymore. And I went through a 7-day detox, and I met a guy in there, and I couldn't even tell you his name. And he's like, man, you ought to just try it. Just try doing something that's different, and try a better way. And then at that point, I was financially bankrupt, emotionally bankrupt, spiritually bankrupt. Like, I didn't give a shit who you are or what you had. I was going to take it from you. And it's like you get into this, you get to that bottom, and I had to make some changes. So I was like, you know what, man, screw it. I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna do this little 30-day program or something like that, and I'm gonna get out of here, and I'm gonna be able to go back to my parents' house and all. Now I'm a grown man at this time. Like I'm 11 and a half years sober to like now, and maybe a little bit more than that. But that was, I'm 47, so I went into rehab at 35, 36 years old. So like at that time, people's got half their retirement built up. They should, and here I am, like homeless drug addict. So I'm like, man, you know what? The way I choose to do things apparently don't work. So let me go ahead and give this shit a try. And stayed in there for 5.5 months, and went through the program at Odyssey House of Louisiana, which is a behavioral modification program. It's not a like a 12-step program or something like that. They touch on some of that, but the behavior modification was big for me, because in order for them to show you the things that you're doing, you have to learn a lot about behavior. So it kind of works for me good now, because it helps me sort through the bullshit with some of the things that I deal with on a daily basis in the training industry. But that's kind of how I got to this point. I went through the 5.5 months. I got out. I didn't really have nothing to do. I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. I started going to an outpatient therapy group just to stay active in my recovery. And that brought me to this place called Acer, where, they was like, look, man, volunteer. Go volunteer somewhere else. Go stay active, do these things. So I started going to these group sessions over there, and the lady that was running it was like, listen, like, you really should get into like the counseling side of everything for drug addicts. Like there's an addict program to become a counselor. So I jumped into that, and it's not, there's no pay involved. So it was like this unpaid internship that you're doing, where you got to stay sober for 3 years to finish the program. So I was probably about a year sober at the time when I started it. And unpaid internships don't have, you got to make money. So I go and I go to the boys club. I'm volunteering over there, and they give me a little job, like, through the volunteering. They're like, hey, man, I think you're good to have around here for the kids. You got to kind of, you went and turned your life around or whatever. And so it's a good example for some of the kids in the area. We'll give you a little part-time job. So
And what's the name of the boys club?
The Boys Club of Louisiana is what it was called.
Okay.
Yeah, just Boys Club of Louisiana is what it's called. So they changed directors. The director was a kid that was younger than me, and he sat me down one day. He's like, they got this big summer program that they do, and it's like 10 hours a day. So, I'm making this low. Every 2 weeks, I might have been getting $300 or something like that. And I'm cleaning my sister's house and cutting somebody's grass. I'm trying to do anything that makes some ends meet to try to start giving back to my ex-wife a little bit and try to take care of my daughter and be responsible for things and trying to just get myself together. And he sits me down one day. He's like, man, we're not going to use you for the summer program. We don't think you're boys club material. And I was like, my ego went in outrage naturally. And but really it was just God redirected me. You know what I'm saying? And I went and I started training this one kid. I ran into a baseball coach at the boys club that I was friends with. And he's like, man, I got a kid that needs to lose some weight. And all of this is happening at the same time. Like, hey, man, when the summer program starts, you're not going to be here no more. So I'm bitter. You know what I'm saying? Then he walks in and he's like, man, start training this kid. So I start training the one kid. The summer program starts. I ain't got a job no more. So I'm like, man, I'm going to go make this training thing work with like 2 clients. But I was motivated at the time. I'm like, I ain't going to let that dude shut me down. So I called up a couple of people that I knew. I told them what I was going. I ended up with about 12 clients for the summer. They were paying me $50 a week. So I was like, now I'm like $600 coming in every week, you know? So I started making a little money. Like it felt like real money at that time. And my buddy gave me a mountain bike. So he's like, man, I see you trying. Here's a mountain bike. I'm riding a mountain bike back and forth and getting myself together. I'm kind of fat now, but I was like abs and stuff at the time because you had to keep moving. Like I was hustling, you know. And then I was going to the gym myself and all of that stuff. And I met a girl. I moved in with her for a little while, and so I bought a trailer. And I put all my equipment in the trailer, and I would go to the park. And now I probably got about 30 clients that I'm seeing throughout the course of the day. And I got boot camp clients. I got ladies that's coming to lose weight and all of this stuff. And I ended up splitting up with her, go back in with my parents for a little while. And then I met who was my wife now. And what happened is in the New Orleans area, well, it's probably the law anywhere. It's like you just can't go set up training in a field somewhere. Like you can't use a public facility and run a business out of it. So that's what I was doing for a long time. Well, I had to, like, they shut me down. Like they started getting some complaints. I mean, I'd be out there sometimes with 25 kids or something, and they got baseball games going on across the way, and people's taking parking spots. It just, at the time, it didn't feel good, but I understand again, it was just God saying, listen, this ain't the level that I'm going to leave you sit at. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm going to push you further than where you at. Even if you complacent, I got bigger plans for you. So me and my fiance at the time was girlfriend at the time was driving past here, and we was together like 6 months, and they had a building for lease, the building that I'm in now, for sale. And she's like, call and see. Just, it can't hurt to see. You got a little bit money. And I'm like, you know, she's like, maybe I could help you out or something like that. So we come by here, we figure out what it is. And it's like this impossible thing, looking at stuff and trying to figure out stuff. And she's like, listen, I'll give you my 401k. Like, I'm willing to take a shot at the whole thing. She's like, I know how driven you are and all of this stuff like that. So it was like 35,000. And then we opened up a couple of lines of credit, and we jumped in head first on faith. And, God had his hands on the whole thing the whole time. So it was, Gilly Bosch, who's one of my business partners now, he came in. We opened this in 14. He came in like 15, and he came in with a couple of ideas for the movement stuff. And he's like, man, I think you're hurting these kids more than you're helping them. And I'm like, you got to explain that. So he kind of comes in, and he's like, man, I got these ideas about movement. I started this little LLC called Primal Wisdom Theory, which was the beginning of GOATA. And Primal Wisdom Theory basically was him looking at some indigenous people. And he started, trying to figure out these different things. The iPad came out. That was crucial. iPad come out in 2012. So it gave us another perspective on movement quality, right? We could actually look at it, because slow motion video wasn't even thought of in 2000 and things like that. It was any of the slow motion stuff that you would see in sports was basically done through the media companies and things like that. But he comes in with these ideas for movement, and you was about to say something?
No, and then that's really your first opportunity to go in and watch these different movement patterns on a daily basis, right?
Yeah, correct. So he gives me, it didn't start off like that though. Like, I'm like, dude, you kind of crazy. Like, we power lift, we Olympic lift, and we do all the speed training and all of that stuff here. And he's like, yeah, got a lot of soft tissue injuries coming up. Once he was around here for a little while, he's like, a lot of soft tissue injuries. So he started doing these evals on my athletes. And he evaled Jamar Chase. And he was like, man, Jamar's a big risk for injury. And I'm like, no, Jamar's not. Like, Jamar Chase is a freak. He's going to be the man one day, and we all going to be famous. And he was like...
That seemed to work out to this point.
Well, I mean, so far. But he...
so far, yeah.
Yeah. He Jamar came down with a ball in the back of the end zone his senior year, and he messed his patella up. So... at that point, I was like, okay, he knows something. Because it made sense. Like, I started reevaluating everything, right? Like, I started looking at, like, he's saying I got these soft tissue injuries, which we did. We had the strained hamstring in there. We had the strained calves and quad pulls and all of this stuff like that. And, occasionally an ACL or something like that, or an Achilles. And it was just part of sports, right? Like, we took no accountability over that because it never happened in my gym. It always happened somewhere else, on the track, on the football field, basketball court. And he's like, nah, it's all movement quality, and the training modalities that have been developed over the past 100 years are wrong. And I was like, so we butted heads a little bit in the beginning. So when Jamal got hurt, I was like, all right, I got to really deep dive this stuff and take a look at what's going on here. So I tell him, I said, look, man, if you really want to do this, then we need to make a business out of it. Let's how you want to do it? Like, you tell me what you want in the perfect world. And he's like, well, you got to stop all of this powerlifting and Olympic lifting that you got going on in your gym. And I was like, all right. So he's like, and you need to buy an iPad. So I was like, cool. So I buy an iPad. I start studying. I looked at the non-contact injury first. And I basically was able to identify the mechanism of injury, which is confusing to a lot of people. They think that the shin and the femur both roll in, but it's actually the shin rolls in and the femur opens. And we was able to identify that in slow motion. We would use the pants on the athletes, like, to see it. Like, you could see one part of it's rotating down. The Alabama injury, when Jameis Williams got hurt, you can really see the stripes on the side of his pants open, like they disappear one way to where the femur open. So we was able to identify that. That was one of the big things. Not at that moment, but we was able to figure it out before that. A lot of times people think everything collapses inward, and it's not necessarily the truth. I started looking at the Achilles tabs, and then I started looking at, well, okay, if we max neural driving these guys through the heel, then the heel's it needs to go to the ground and change the direction. So it was kind of like we taking these ball of the feet athletes, and we putting them on their heels. It just, at that time, it kind of it clicked. So then I was like, well, maybe we could try deadlifting with straight feet, get away from the bar, use a trap bar. So we tried a few different variations, and then eventually Ricky Stanzi came along, and he's like, dude, just, he's like, you're battling this shit, man. Fucking stop. Just stop doing it. Don't do it and find something else. He's like, go back in the lab. You did it up until this point. Keep recreating the system. And then he jumped in, and now he's a business partner with us. So between the three of us, we all own GOATA. And it's
why don't you tell our listeners who Ricky Stanzi is?
So
for
Ricky
those who don't
Stanzi
know.
was he won the Orange Bowl at Iowa. He was a 5th round draft pick by the Kansas City Chiefs, who basically destroyed his body in the weight room. And he was he told me a story one time. He's like, dude, I had shoulder surgery on my non-throwing arm, and he's like, from getting slammed into the turf. He said, I'm 2 days off the surgery table, and I'm doing single hand snatches with my throwing arm. That was what they, he's like, dude, it was like you go in there and you pound at the weights. And he's like, I could never figure out why there was certain throws I couldn't make. And he's like, by the time I got to the league, he's like, I felt so broken. He's like, I'm just trying to buy time to where I could get myself to a retirement or whatever. And he's like, it got to the point where I ended up on a scout team with the Giants as a receiver. And he's like, I needed that one more year or something like that. And I don't know how all of that stuff works, but he got in there and he got his last year. So he got a pension or whatever from the NFL. And then he just started really deep diving movement, started reading a lot of stuff and things like that. And then when he seen what me and Gilly were doing, he was like, this is it. He had went through all of them. He went through functional patterns, FRC, WEC method, and all of these different places or whatever, and kind of stumbled across GOATA on, like, you go into the little search thing in Instagram, and he ran across either my page or Gilly's page, and he started deep diving us. And then when he went down a rabbit hole, he reached out and got certified, and he's like, this is it. Y'all got it figured out. So
the power of Instagram is what brought Ricky Stanzi into GOATA. Wasn't aware of that. I did want to touch on a couple things. It's really interesting to hear that a Jamar Chase injury, you said senior year of high school, correct?
Correct.
What caused you to really open your mind to the idea of there might be another way to prevent some of these soft tissue injuries or other injuries that some of these athletes incur. And it was from your one business partner who was saying to you at the time, there might be another way to train these elite athletes. And Jamar Chase is obviously one of the best young receivers that we have in the NFL here today. But I wanted to go all the way back and just touch on, first of all, it was an incredible journey you just took us through from where you were, where you grew up, to where you are now. It really goes without being said that being able to pull yourself out of where you were at the beginning to establish the type of business, and I'm sure there's a lot more in the future here that we have yet to see, but it's truly incredible what you've been able to do to this point. I wanted to touch on, just from you being from New Orleans and growing up there, so you I think it was 1998, 99 where this started, where you got your first injury in softball and things started to go south. But I wanted to fast forward a few years to something that impacted your community and the city of New Orleans, which was Hurricane Katrina.
Mm-hmm.
So Hurricane Katrina rolls around, and could you just tell us about the impact on the city? I know you had told me before the show that you had a few jobs here and there, and it was really tough, not only for you personally, but for the city. Could you just expand on what the impact of Hurricane Katrina did to you and kind of where you were at that point in time?
It actually, like, to really give you some insight, there was a lot of let's say, like, illegal workers coming in. There was a lot of drugs coming in through that. And man, I don't know what it was. Like, if you had drugs, I knew who you was. So there was a lot of cash floating around because people was doing a lot of work. I jumped into, like, this construction stuff. I mean, I was making $200, $300 a day sometimes, and probably using every bit of it. which at the time, it seems like a lot of, it don't seem like nothing to me now, but at the time when you're a drug addict, that could support your habit. You know what I'm saying? So, and that's all I was concerned about. So I had got into like some fencing stuff, but I mean, it was, it depends on who you ask. Like it sent my life more into a tailspin, but there's probably a lot of people here today that have plenty money left over from Katrina because they helped rebuild the city. You've seen the city come back bigger and stronger probably than what it ever was. Everybody knows the story of the Saints and the Falcons on the night in the Superdome when it came back. I mean, Michael Irvin used it in his his Hall of Fame speech where he said football flexed its greatest muscle that night or whatever, its biggest muscle that night when the Saints beat the Falcons. So, I guess it affected people in a lot of different ways. I mean, a lot of people lost loved ones, so it was very serious. I've seen a lot of people taken advantage of at that time, like with like these contractors that were coming in from out of town. It just, I was in the middle of my drugging at the time. So be completely honest with you, I guess you would get, if you asked 100 people that, you get 100 different answers. And, mine was it really, it was a waste of time for me in the sense that I just set my life more into a downward spiral. And it should have been a time where I could have been, helping rebuild my city and setting myself up too to be in a better position while helping others. And I didn't do that.
It seems pretty apparent that throughout your journey and throughout your story, as you've evolved into the trainer that you are today, there were different points of inflection. Like your first point of inflection was your cell phone dropping off when you're talking to your mom about seeing your daughter, and then meeting your now current wife where she's giving you her 401k and saying, I believe in you, right? And putting her faith into you. Meeting your business partner now who's trying to reframe the way you think about training and saying there might be alternatives to help these athletes be the best that they can be. And then obviously Jamar Chase, who's a big name, rookie of the year, but being that high profile gives him a lot of attention from you, from other trainers, from the media. And when he got hurt, maybe that was a warning sign to you that, hey, there might be a better way to do things. And it kind of shifted your line of thinking, which I think is interesting. So kind of going on that theme of discussing you training Jamar Chase since, I believe you said 8th grade, right? You knew him pretty young. But something I want to touch on was fast forward to this year. He wins Rookie of the Year. He's one of the best receivers in football. He's in the Super Bowl, almost wins the Super Bowl. But you actually got the opportunity to go out and visit Jamar Chase. Can you tell us a little bit about your visit to Cincinnati?
Let me say this too, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But I actually am not the only person that's had a hand in Jamar Chase. Like, and then the other thing too is Jamar Chase is a very gifted and talented kid. And there's a guy here, Nat Nunnery. He's got this thing called NXT Training. You may have spoken to Nat. Nat's had a big hand.
He was actually the last guest on our podcast, so we just heard his story. So we're hearing both back to back here.
Gotcha. Yeah. So Nat's a good guy. He does like a lot of his field work and stuff like that, and some speed work with him and things like that. But and then I haven't seen Jamar in really a couple of sessions in the last 2 years. But so he's been kind of moving around a little bit. He's got that status now, so it's cool to go, spread your wings a little bit. But he knows where home's at. He's always welcome home. But I did get to go up there and listen. When you spend from the 8th grade to like now with somebody like that, and it's pretty you become family. You know what I'm saying? And obviously there was a relationship with me with him to say, hey, I need to change what I'm doing because I can't hurt this kid. Now, just because that was Jamar Chase has this group that they hang out with. They call themselves FTF, Feed the Family. And there's Donald Clay, and there's Aaron Brule, who's at Michigan State, and there's like 12 of them that all played like Division I or some kind of college football, or one of them played basketball, and they were all in here together. And that between 2018, 2019, those 2 years, and then 2020, I had a group of kids that we was camping with, we were traveling with. You become so close to these kids, like it's you're just family or whatever. So when I went out there, like it was like, Coach, get up here. Like, this is my address. We got you covered. We got the suite, whatever. Y'all don't worry about no food, or just get up. And I'm like, I didn't stay at his house, but I stayed at a hotel. But we went to the house, and his mom had dinner for us. And it was me and some of the guys that, was in that little group or whatever. And Donald Clay Sr., who is one of my best friends, his son's a safety at SMU. But he went up there with me. And then we had Griddy with us, too, the little dude that made the dance up. That actually started here. Kind of, he's from New Orleans, but they all trained here. So that's where Jamal was exposed to the Griddy, was here. And now it's because Darrell Williams trains here. So they all around it the whole time. But
can you tell us how that started? The Griddy, was that just something that he came up with?
Yeah.
Or
yeah, Alan Davis is his name. They call him Griddy. So he did a little dance one time. He put it on one of them social media channels, and he called it the Griddy. And then fast forward to now, when it's on video games, it's insane, because just the way him and Jamal and everybody just from that same little area. But he was up there, and he's like, "Man, Coach, you going by Jamal?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "I'm coming with y'all." And he goes up there, and he's a celebrity wherever he goes to. So it was a good time. But I mean, we probably parked by the head coach. Like, it was like 30 steps to the suite that we was in. And the next day it was dinner again and all of that. And then we came home that Monday or whatever. But, it was a blast, dude. He had the 3-touchdown game. Darrell had 2 touchdowns and 100 and something yards. Jamal had 200 and something yards. Jamal took like a 5 and out, like 75 yards or so. Like, it was just like, you couldn't have picked a better game to go to unless you'd have been there when they won the Super Bowl. If Burrow gets sacked, he had Ramsey beat again. So they'd have scored right there and they'd have won. That would have been an insane way to end the year. He could have retired and been like the greatest receiver in history or something. But
yeah, that would have been quite the ending of the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it would have. The season, just in general.
Unbelievable season to top off a Rookie of the Year, Super Bowl appearance, and then to catch the game-winning Super Bowl touchdown. That would be the perfect end to an unbelievable season. Yeah, that's interesting to hear that Alan Davis is the creator of the Griddy, actually nicknamed Griddy, which we want to give him credit because a lot of folks don't know, and before I actually met you, didn't know where this dance actually came from. But it's interesting to hear that it came from Alan Davis and the guys that you're around. Could you, for a second, could we kind of pivot and go towards the beginning of GOATA? I know when we had spoke prior to the show, you started to tell me about comparing your own kids' movements to movements of some of the best players in a variety of sports. You named Michael Jordan, Deion Sanders, some of the greatest players in their respective sports. Why did you choose those specific players, and why were you comparing them to younger kids at the time?
So it was basically what GOATA is GOATA was an observation-based technology. So we looked at crawling derivatives. We looked at super athletes that were like a Michael Jordan, who basically played as long as he wanted to and avoided the repetitive stress injuries and non-contact catastrophics, the Ed Reeds. Deion was a little bit on the inside edge of the foot, but he moved pretty well. I mean, and listen, when we say movement and we talk about these athletes, we didn't train Deion Sanders, and we didn't train a lot of people are like, they didn't train GOATA. GOATA didn't start until, and I'm like, we're not saying we trained them. We're saying we use that movement pattern as one that would be ideal because it's more injury resistant, right? Then we studied a lot of tribes, Karubo tribes, Tarahumara, like these semi-indigenous and things like that, that when you go back and you look at these people that are unscathed by Western civilization, there's a lot of similarities to the movement patterns of a toddler or someone like that. So when you go back and you look at, well, why does the toddler lose it, but the tribesman keeps it? And you go back and you look at resting postures and shoes. And I'm not talking about, there's some tribes out there now that they got shoes and stuff. And that running tribe, the Tarahumara tribe, they have, like, they've been given New Balance and stuff. Like people's going there because they were a running community. So the running companies started taking notice of it. But when we look, we really dug into like barefoot, buck naked in the Amazon somewhere or something like that. Like there's tribes out there still that exist today, and they could be 100 and something years old, and some of them are still hunting late in age like that. Like it's their survival tactics. So we looked at that. And then what we did was, is through slow motion video, it gave us the ability to compare it to what we were doing training wise. None of it matches up, like with the way that they move. So we built a system around the pattern that we identified. And as we started to use it on the athletes and started to use it on general population, these people, I mean, we got grandpas that come in here, they're 65 years old, they've been in back pain for 20 years, and they come here and they get out of sciatic pain in 3 days. So
that's unbelievable.
Go back to where I was. Go back and like I said, I don't get into the religion thing or nothing like that, but I'm very spiritual. And there was these moments, right? Like you identified them. The cell phone incident, maybe been the first time that I prayed. My wife giving me the money, or people that's been put in my life. Even my buddy that gave me the mountain bike, like that helped. There's been help along the way. When you highly favored, these things start to happen to you. And I had to understand that God had a plan for me. When this was presented to me, this was the ultimate part of the plan, because we giving people their lives back. I got a guy that I've been working with that's a bodybuilder that was going to kill himself. He's like, I'm 30 years old. I can't handle the pain no more. Opiates don't work for me. Injections don't work for me. I'm not going to be alive at 40 like this. And we talk all the time now because GOATA got him out of that. So it's saving lives. It's giving people their life back. Grandparents are playing with their grandkids, and it's so much bigger than an argument you might see on Instagram or something like that. And I mean, I'm human though. I get caught up in some of that bullshit. But you want to tell everybody, when you know something is good and you know it's right, you want to kind of give it to everybody. And naturally, there's a business side of it, but we give a lot of information out on social media. You know what I'm saying? If you go follow our page, we got people that call us all the time. Man, I just started doing what y'all do on Instagram and my knee pain went away. And just different things like that. So, the pattern that we identified is what we use to train our athletes now. The system we built around it, strength programs and all of that. I mean, and this is the difference between like our program and a lot of other programs. Is a lot of other programs, they don't have any seniors in their program. Because if you go to the Olympic lifting coach, or you go to the guy that done these other certain movement things, they all got to stop. Like we just did some powerlifting stuff with, not power, but we went work with the powerlifting community a little bit. And these guys are getting 45, 50 years old and they hurting. They broken down. But Ida Keeling, who died at 105 years old, ran 100 meters at 104. She's the oldest living person to ever go to the Penn Relays or something like that. Like there's these Hurricane Hawkins. They still doing it. They straight foot, inside ankle bone high. They set a bow. So we look at the indigenous tribesman that's, 80 years old and he's still out hunting. He's doing the same thing. So we knew that by the elders being there, we seen it in the babies. We seen it at the guy that is going to Ed Reed's got to put his body through the most pounding. We knew that it was the right way to move. the flip side of it is everybody argues, well, there's so many different ways that you can move. Well, there are. Some of them get you hurt, some of them don't. And the thing is, there's only one real way to move. There's a movement system now, right? We identified that through the neuromuscular system, skeletal system, all of this. When you look at the human body, the cardiovascular system works one way. The respiratory system works one way. The digestive system works one way. Why the hell wouldn't we move one way? But movement's been bastardized, and it's mostly through, it's a couple of things. Western civilizations destroyed a lot of stuff because we're not on the go. We don't, we the only place in the world where you go hunting on a full stomach. You know what I'm saying? So when you start looking at the luxuries we have, and recliners are terrible. You sit in flexion the whole time. You're just sitting there. But I don't know, man. It's GOATA's the way.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to hear the evolution of GOATA in just 8 years at this point, from where it started to where it is now. And I think you do a great job of trying to just bring light to what you've kind of discovered, not only just to high-level athletes, but also to those who, might be grandparents and want to play with their grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
And, it really gives, bodybuilders and powerlifters a second chance of a pain-free lifestyle from where they are today. So it's interesting. One thing I like to ask a lot of folks who come on the show is, you have all these athletes, you've expanded your base of athletes over the last couple of years. Do you find it difficult, or what's the hardest part about keeping these players motivated or on track training wise?
The top ain't for everybody. It's like you take a Jamal Chase, he's going to work. Like, whether it's here or it's House of Athlete or it's one of these other places, he's going to work. It's why who he is. Like, he don't take no breaks. You get the kid that's dad pushes him into the gym that don't want to be here. He's going to be a little more difficult to motivate. You know what I'm saying? He can't see the bigger picture. He's being forced. He's being taken off the video game. I think that motivation is kind of when we motivate, it's one, you got to walk in the door. If I get you in the door, then that's the first step towards getting the kid to get moving and get motivated. The environment that we've created here at GLS has there's an accountability factor that comes along with walking in the door where, hey man, fix your feet. Like, there's a lot of little things that go on. So it kind of, they push each other. That class that Jamal was in, the class that came behind him, the 19 class, they were so easy to train because they would come in here, they would pump the music, they were fired up. And then if you wasn't working, they was in your ass. So they were really doing it themselves. But, kids change throughout the years and stuff. But, keeping kids motivated is, you got to keep things fresh. And that's a hard part with GOATA is that it's a system that's being evolved. It's evolving constantly. It changes year to year. It gets better year to year. We find some things that don't work as well, and we walk away from them. And we got to be able to do that, right? But we still able to do everything that it's supposed to. It's just, it's not sexy. Like, it's not hyped up, like running around garbage cans and things like that. You see a lot of this training that looks cool on social media.
Yeah, social media definitely skews what people think might be the right way to train. Not always the sexiest way to train, but it might be the most effective. Yeah. So there's not always a one-to-one correlation on those types of things. Just as we wrap up here, future plans. So what's next for you and GLS and GOATA from here? Gym expansions, rolling out online programs. Like, what is next kind of in the fold for you? We have
website, like a do-it-yourself platform. We have some Recode225.com is the do-it-yourself platform. We have certifications. We're going to continue to keep building on all of that stuff. We have an advanced curriculum now where you could come into the facility and live here for 3 months. We put some living space in the back. So that's something that we're going to develop. It's in its first phases. I got 3 guys that's in here right now, and basically they're paying us to be here to learn how to run a gym, and it's like college, you know. Getting it. We got some stuff we've been trying to do with the Andrews Institute. So that's, I know you've seen me there a couple of times. I was there with Hollywood Brown a few weeks ago. I was there with Micah Parsons not too long ago. So we're doing some things out there that we're trying to get them to look at it, maybe do some research behind it or something like that. If that happens and it gets mainstream, we would love to get into the education systems where we could provide these kids with some type of GOATA type exercises inside of PE, something that's done every day to help balance out the sitting in the desk, possibly looking at changing some desk and changing some things like that to where it's not just affecting, like, listen, Tim, my whole thing is I'm not going after the athlete, I'm going after the world. And it may sound crazy right now, but this movement 8 years ago was laughed at. Now it's taken very seriously on the highest levels. And, you know, I know it's going to keep developing. I know as long as I stay the path and I keep doing everything and my business partners focus. Dude, Ricky Stanzi and Jose Bosch are 2 of the most focused and driven people. They're like me. Like when you get us all in a room, there's a lot of passion. And you probably see it in our videos. You can see it in our styles and things like that. And I think that draws a lot of people in. But, man, the future is like we haven't even scratched the surface. Like we haven't even hit a momentum with this stuff. So it's like it's just going to keep developing and blowing up. And we made a lot of mistakes along the way. The way we marketed things and kind of did a few things wasn't the best way, but we got laughed at a lot in the beginning too. So you people teach you how to treat them, right?
That was a perfect segue into my last question was, what advice would you give yourself at the start that you know today, if anything? And some people say that they had to learn all those different lessons along the way. But if there's one thing, whether it's marketing or doing something a little bit different than you did, what would it be, if anything?
Business wise, I don't know, man. But I could tell you this: like I would have had a better relationship and understanding of who God was. It's like He's been a spiritual guidance for me. So when things don't feel right to me now, I don't do them. When they feel good, I do them. It don't matter. I get people that walk in these doors every day and they want to sell me something and they want me to buy into something and they want me to do this and they want me to do that. And we're going to make GOATA go to the next level. And I'm like, you know, and if it feels right, good. If I feel like it's somebody I could help, good. If I feel like it's somebody that could help me, that's not always what I'm looking for. But I would say trust your gut. To myself with a couple of things. I made a couple of business decisions along the way that I'd like to have that money back right now. Another thing is I have a few people around me in my circle, like a Donald Clay or Jose Bosch and a Rick Stanzi that, you know, for an example, I opened a gym across the lake from where we at, about an hour away, and the timing wasn't right. I didn't have the right personnel to do it and things like that, and I did it anyway. And it ended up costing me about $50,000. So, you know, you learn some lessons like that if I got to put that into marketing GOATA, we might be a year ahead of ourselves right now. So just, you know, be open-minded and listen to people. I mean, I'm the GOATA guy saying be open-minded, but I know better, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's key in business, is keeping an open mind and, you know, remaining flexible for those different opportunities that might come your way. So I think that's kind of where we want to wrap up. That was a great kind of background of who you are, who GLS and GOATA and everything kind of coming together at this point. It's been a long journey for you. Mm-hmm. It's been an incredible journey just listening to it. And, we wish you the best of luck moving forward. So thank you again for your time. It was great to have you on, Gary.
Thank you, man. I appreciate the opportunity.